This is a review for chapter 221 of My Hero Academia. My name's Core. This is my co-host Dab. And what did you think of the chapter?
Once again, it's another chapter that's gone into like a flashback of the League of Villains meeting Gigantomachia, which is leading, of course, to the current. So we can only expect what's coming from this chapter to have a major play here within the next few chapters. But from the get-go, of course, we're still seeing the end of his rampage as he's attacking the League of Villains. Fortunately, the Doctor has, at this point stepped in and basically played a recording to calm him down. And you have Tomaru, of course, stating that he does not want this because, of course, he's losing his mind. But at the same time, the Doctor, states to him that Gigantomachia is All for One's bodyguard, possesses otherworldly stamina, has multiple quirks without modification. That's a key thing right there, is the fact he is a multiple quirk user with no modification. So he is not technically a Nomu. He is a normal human that is able to handle that ability. And of course, he was hidden away long before Tomaru was even pulled into the whole shebang. So of course, Tomaru really didn't know it about him.
Yeah, the fact that he could wield multiple quirks is really fascinating. I want them to go more in depth on it. I think we're definitely going to get that later on.
I wouldn't be surprised if it plays a major factor, and I think that's gonna be a real shell shocker when we find out kind of a backstory for Giganto. And then of course this was all in favor for all for One to make sure that his dream and will would live on if something were to happen to him, especially since it was All Might slowly whittling him away. He made sure to hide such a powerful force away. Dabi also points out that this is not a good gift, because once again, he's really not accepting of Tomaru because there's a huge gap between Tomaru and All for One as far as strength goes. Dabi tried to scorch him, had very little effect on him, no damage really taken, and he just continued to rampage. So even out of the League of Villain elites that they currently have, none of them are on par anywhere with what All for One had for his elites.
I got a feeling that All for One has more hidden elites saved away that we don't know about that we're going to see later on.
I wouldn't be surprised on that. You always keep an ace in the hole, and I wouldn't be surprised with the fact that he's been in power. We know he's been alive for 200 years, hiding stuff and taking in strong people for at least 150 years. Since, I imagine he started doing really a lot of movement in his 20s and 30s. So you've got to imagine that all this time he's been gathering forces. And then, of course, the Doctor really quickly points out that, Tomaru is weak. He's really relied a lot on Kuriguri and his warp gate ability, and that he has nothing really to show for it. And with that, at this point, he of course summons them, twice burps, and they are summoned. I'm going to call it the Black Bile Void Quirk because I don't know what its official name is. And of course, Mr. Compress points out that this is the same quirk that All for One used in Camino, which is also interesting because as far as we knew, when All for One steals a quirk, it becomes his. But this apparently is he has a quirk and another person has a quirk, so I don't know if that is him able to share it, him able to take it without taking it, leaving it with the user, if that's like a choice thing, if he's able to share it indefinitely as many times as he wants, which would explain why he can make so many no-moves, because he can just keep putting quirks in them without losing them in himself. That, of course, will be interesting to see how that develops, especially with some of the other quirks that we've seen. At this point, like I had mentioned, they are, of course, summoned to the Doctor's lab. Right off the bat, we see that there are at least 12 high ends that are visible right from the get-go. We know at least one of them has been defeated already because, of course, this is a previous history chapter, kind of a flashback to before the Hero Awards, them being announced. So we know one of those will be defeated. Taking a look at them real quickly, we can see some of them appear to have prosthetics. One of them seems to have prosthetic legs. Some of them seem to have no legs. One of them, of course, is a female. And looking at some of them, I'm really curious on how they're developed, because looking at them, they have what appear to be some grievous wounds. As you can see, the closest one, of course, is missing, the top of its head. Another one looks like it's in the same shape. The female one seems to have something going on with its head. So I'm wondering if, with the high ends, if they're kind of like a Frankenstein kind of version where they're dead and or resurrected. So I'm curious to see how they're actually developed and where the high ends come from.
Wouldn't surprise me if they used to be elite villains that were taken from their corpse.
Well, knowing that what's going on with the Doctor here, which we'll get to in a moment, is he could easily, with that quirk, summon people I don't know whether they have to be alive or dead, what his limits are with that, but he could easily, kidnap people without even having to be in the room with them, so they'd just disappear off the face of the earth, and next thing you know, they'd be a Nomu. So I'd be curious to see, they could be previous heroes, they could be previous villains, they could just be your average Joes. Not too sure how he's obtaining them. From the looks of it, some of them have actual physical body modifications. One looks to have like an arm cannon, things like that. I'm only assuming that, of course, they're going to be just as strong as the one we've seen fight, or stronger, since that was probably the first one that was finished that fought Endeavor. And then, of course, Dabi is the first one to notice that these stand out, that they're not normal Nomus. The doctor tells him he's got a keen eye. Once again, that was the second time in the chapter, of course, that he had been told that. That to me is kind of curious, because it kind of alludes to, I would almost say, detective work. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dabi is some sort of, I'm gonna classify it as a dark hero, that he is like an undercover hero, but he's willing to do extremely dirty things. So I would have to kind of compare it to a villain, but at the same time a hero. So that could lead into, his backstory of why he's there, how he got there, and things like that. And then, of course, the first Nomu that he looks at is, of course, the one that will end up fighting Endeavor. So I don't know if Dabi ends up picking that one out, or once again if that was the first one finished. But that is definitely the one that fights Endeavor. You can tell from the upper shoulder muscles that seem to connect to the neck. It's got that same artwork as the one that will fight him. The doctor, of course, goes from there, stating that he is aiming to create a masterpiece. He wants the perfect Nomu, which in our previous chapters we, of course, mentioned how Deku has started developing multiple quirks, and that he may be the perfect Nomu. So he may be the masterpiece that the doctor is looking for. The doctor, of course, right off the bat asks if everyone is well, including Tomaru's father, who's clearly just a hand on his face, as far as we know. He, of course, tells them to stay back. He is very secretive, doesn't want his identity to be known. He says if they approach, he will kill them by sending them back to Gigantomachia and having him tear them apart. He gives them a fake name of Daruma Ujiko, but as we know from his face, and if you go back to Chapter 1, he is in fact Dr. Tsubasa, who told Deku that he was corkless. So I'm wondering if that will put Deku in any real danger, because like I said before, he can clearly summon people, so he could easily summon Deku wherever the hell he wants, and at that point be able to ambush him. But we'll have to see if he remembers who Deku is, especially since there's been the heavy hints before that the winged Nomu in the previous chapters was, of course, Dr. Tsubasa's grandson, which, of course, was one of Bakugo's friends back when they were, 5 years old. He states, of course, that the Nomu are his children, and he is dedicated to his work, which he has thus given as a gift to All for One, and it's all for one. He, of course, wants to know what Tomaru's plan is, because, of course, he doesn't want to waste his research, and he even tells him that, done nothing, you have accomplished nothing. What is the point of backing you? You're worthless, your friends are worthless, what are we going to do? And, of course, he quickly mentions that, of course, that what Tomaru has used is only a small portion of what he has to offer, which means even though we only saw 12 high ends, that doesn't mean that there are only 12 high ends. There could be other ones at other stages of development, and, of course, he might have already started the next phase from the step up from the high ends. So, to me, he might already have another stronger version in development. So those just might be an A class, and he might already be developing an S class Nomu.
I really hope that Tomaru doesn't replicate those quirk bullets, because I don't like the fact that heroes could get their quirks taken away.
See, the thing about that is, he does ask the doctor to duplicate the bullets. My curiosity would be, though, is because if you remember when they ambushed the truck, he said there were two things, and he asked which one was the bullets. We don't know if he's got the bullets or the cure, because Overhaul had said that he had managed to make both, so we don't know which one he actually has, and if he'll be able to duplicate them without Eerie. So I'm wondering if that will also thus thrust Eerie into danger, especially as a person who would be the ultimate weapon against a Nomu, since she can rewind their time and basically completely undo a Nomu. But right now, of course, she can't control her quirk, so she's more dangerous to anyone around them, because last thing you want to do is revert people back to, an egg or whatever, genetic makeup that they may have. So I don't think the doctor would be for something like that. unless it was a hard opponent, because he seems very much about quirk development. So I think he's the opposite of what Overhaul was aiming for. So I can't see him wanting to do that unless he was wanting to get rid of One for All to kind of eliminate that. But once again, you'd have to guarantee that it is Deku that's inherited it, but it doesn't seem like Tomaru knows about how that quirk is developed, unlike All for One, who does.
Well, you definitely know the Liberation Army is going to be against a bullet that could take away someone's quirk.
Most definitely. And we know they're already in hot water versus each other, so we know that much. But it'd be interesting to see how he plans to use those bullets and if he can duplicate them at all, or if he'll incorporate them in some sort of a Nomu, because that would make him even more dangerous. Heroes showing up to the scene, losing their powers, and then getting killed would send fear through the entire hero society.
Eventually, Tomaru is going to have to get with the Liberation Army because he has no income, he has no structure, he has no facilities, he doesn't have any infrastructure.
Exactly. He's going to have to ally with someone that's got money. He kind of threw away the chance with Overhaul, unless he takes over, the Liberation Army, since they seem to be hinting at that they want people to be able to freely use their quirks as long as they can kind of meet on some equal ground. But it seems like they're already at each other's throats, but perhaps that's just the way it's being meant to be interpreted, is that they're looking to defeat them, when in fact that they're looking to make contact with them, because they would be the perfect people to sell weapons to. And that's exactly what he's wanting to do, sell illegal weapons under the table to anyone that wants to use their quirk, which is most likely going to be your average criminal. And then with, of course, the end of the chapter, the last panel, you see Tomaru kind of in the panel, but the main focus really seems to be Spinner standing behind him with a kind of hesitant look on his face. So I'm wondering if Spinner is starting to doubt the League of Villains even more, since it seems that they've deviated strongly from what Stain was all about. So I'll be curious to see if maybe he tries to leave, or what's going to end up happening there.
If the bullet is the cure for the quirk, get your quirks back, then hopefully, Spinner would steal that and then give it away to the real hero. Real heroes like All Might.
I'd be curious if those were like the bullets that do that, if it would have some sort of like mutation effect instead, since they already have quirk factors, if it would increase their quirk factors, thus overpowering them, which then at that point would also be bad for the villains to have, because then at that point they'd basically have an item that overpowers them and could literally turn your average villain then into, from like a C rank to like an A rank, or like an A rank into like a double S rank kind of villain who can just tear through and take out some of the harder heroes to take down. Because, so far we know of the top 10, we've only really seen 3 of them kind of in combat, 2 of them technically in combat. So, and Endeavor, of course, got really beat up by the high end. So anything stronger than a high end right now would probably be able to easily take out the top 10 heroes in Japan. We don't know what the rest of the world has to offer, but we don't know what the rest of the world has as villain problems either.
I mean, All Might was considered the most powerful in the world. So we could basically gauge how powerful the other heroes in the world are based on that.
So where I could see this chapter or this arc being kind of a lead up to a fear that's going to spread throughout the world, because this is definitely the makings of the foundation of the new League of Villains. It's not just going to be a handful of people that can't do anything. You're going to be talking being able to take out the top 10. As we saw, Endeavor barely won, and we don't even know if that thing's dead. They say that they were able to he wasn't able to collect its body, but that assumes that if these things aren't already dead and resurrected, that they can't come back once again. So we don't know what's going on with that one. So it'll be curious to see if that one comes back, if the doctor manages to summon it or get its body, because I imagine he wouldn't want to leave that out there where they can study it and find ways to fight against them.
Yeah, we can make so many theories based on this chapter alone. So that's the end of our review. I would give this 8 out of 10. It was a good chapter. It gave us a lot of information. And what do you give it?
I'd agree with an 8. It gives us a lot of information that we were missing there when we went into the Hero Awards, and they did that. So we didn't know what was kind of going on with the League of Villains, since Kirogiri got caught during, I believe that was the provisional licensing when Kirogiri got caught. So it's been a good amount of months since we've really seen a lot of action from the League of Villains, and then of course, then all of a sudden they showed up with a high end, and we were just kind of like, where'd that come in? So a lot of good fill in here, and it gives us a lot of direction to kind of see where it's going. So I agree with an 8 out of 10.
And that concludes our review.
And then once again, if you like what you heard, definitely click the like button, subscribe, and make sure to ring the bell so you get notifications when we put out new chapters.
New foo foo foo.